I fully understand all of that, and I've no doubt that Georgia perhaps will be the next country that has this conversation. I also fully accept that NATO is a defensive organisation. Of course I do. What I'm saying is that Putin is able to use this continued expansion as an excuse with his own country, perhaps even with his own generals, for the continuance of this and perhaps more incursions to come. But my question is this. I quite understand why, if I lived in Finland, I might think it's a good idea to join NATO. But just because the country wants to join doesn't mean NATO has to accept them. And I ask you, is there a danger that we are boxing Putin into such a corner that he might use measures that none of us we've feared, frankly, since 1945? He's openly talked about nuclear weapons. Is the West on a collision course here? Are we actually perhaps going to make this situation the worst the world's ever seen?
Well, Nigel, I think you've got to turn it round and look at this differently. I absolutely support Vladimir Putin and the Russian people's right to completely dominate and own, without interference, the territory of Russia. That's their absolute right to have sovereign independence of their own territory. And exactly the same way, Sweden and Finland and Poland and Romania and other countries that for a period of the 20th century were under Soviet control purely because the Red Army in 1943, 44, 45 advanced through their territory and did not withdraw at the end of the Second World War. For those reasons only, those countries became Soviet, Russian by extension. So they have an absolute right to want to be independent. Ukraine is a separate issue. We can come back to Ukraine specifically in a moment. But the point I'm making is that all those countries and Russia have an absolute right to the independence of their own territory. And just because NATO has expanded, the defensive alliance that is NATO, and will probably shortly include Sweden and Finland, that should not be interpreted to any sensible thinking Russian to think that represents a threat to Russia. No, we support Russia's right to run its rule of law within its own boundaries. Sweden the same, Finland the same, Great Britain the same. So let's not get carried away. There's no expansion going to push into Russia, but Ukraine is a separate issue.